Okay, let's dive in. Have you ever, like, sat down to meditate,
Right.
really hoping for that calm, maybe even, bliss,
Hmm.
and instead you just fidget, or your mind races, your to-do list pops up, you feel bored, maybe even a bit anxious,
Oh, yeah.
like your brain just flat out refuses to play along, and you end up feeling like you're somehow failing at peace.
It's so common, and that's what we're calling the meditation trap, right?
Exactly.
And what's really striking about the source material we're looking at today is that it argues this isn't your fault, not a sign of you failing.
Okay.
It puts forward something pretty radical. What if being still isn't mainly about, say, willpower or how disciplined you are?
Uh-huh.
What if it hinges on whether your actual biology, your brain chemistry, your body is even ready for it?
Oh,
What if calm isn't some technique you have to force, but a state that just kind of emerges when the conditions inside you are right?
that completely flips the script, doesn't it?
Total.
So this deep dive is all about exploring that. We're digging into source material that argues, basically, why the usual ways of approaching stillness often don't work so well in our, chaotic modern lives.
Right. It's saying the problem isn't the meditation practice itself, but maybe the shaky foundation we're trying to build it on in the first place.
A shaky foundation like?
Like our internal chemistry, our sleep patterns, how recovered we are, the biological nuts and bolts that most meditation advice just skips over.
Gotcha. And the source for this?
Yeah, it's a detailed text called Build the Brain, Then Meditate. It's by José Julio Córdova Jaramillo. He goes by Jota. And interestingly, he worked with an AI named Onto using something called ontosynclecticist logic.
Ontosynclecticist logic.
Mm-mm.
Okay, that sounds complex.
It does, but the core idea seems to be about integrating all these different scientific pieces, the biology, the chemistry, into one framework about being ready for stillness.
Right. So our mission today then is to figure out why just trying harder at meditation might be the wrong approach for, a modern stressed out nervous system.
Mm-hmm.
And to uncover this science-backed blueprint for actually building up that internal capacity for calm from the ground up.
Exactly. This is kind of your shortcut to understanding why pushing harder might not work and what actually could.
Okay, so where does this whole problem start, according to the source? It jumps right into this meditation trap idea and stillness without structure. Why is it so hard for us modern folks to just sit still?
Well, the text frames it as less of a personal flaw, not a moral failing, and more of a mismatch, a fundamental mismatch between ancient practices and modern life. It points out that these contemplative practices, while they look simple, often developed in cultures or contexts that had built-in biological support systems.
Like monasteries, maybe?
Exactly. Think about traditional monastic life.
Yeah.
You've got early sunlight, regular sleep schedules, predictable rhythms, community support. That all equals a sense of safety, biologically speaking.
Right. Built-in regulation.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Precisely. Now contrast that with, us. Constant digital pings, weird light schedules messing with sleep, irregular routines, chronic stress, maybe feeling isolated.
It's kind of the biological opposite.
It really is. And the source suggests this environment shapes a nervous system that's basically wired for reaction, for distraction, not really for quiet stillness.
Ah, okay. So all those frustrations, the racing thoughts, the urge to jump up when you try to meditate, the book says those aren't you being bad at it.
Not at all. It describes them as signals, like data points coming from your nervous system.
Signals about what?
Signals about unmet needs. Maybe you need rest. Maybe you need better fuel. Maybe your system doesn't feel safe enough to settle down. Trying to just barrel through those signals often makes things worse. You're basically ignoring your body's dashboard warning.
Okay. And modern life throws another wrench in the works, right? Something the source calls the digital dopamine crash. That one really jumped out at me.
Yes. That's a huge piece of the modern puzzle. The book explains how constantly interacting with digital stuff, notifications, endless scrolling, switching apps, it really taxes our dopamine system.
Dopamine. That's the motivation, attention chemical.
Exactly. We're essentially training our brains to crave these little high-frequency hits of novelty, like tiny rewards constantly.
So we get used to that buzz.
We do. And then when you try to shift gears into the low-stimulus state of meditation, your brain isn't just feeling bored, it's actually experiencing something like neurochemical withdrawal.
Wow. withdrawal.
Yeah, that restless feeling, that powerful urge to just check your phone for a second, that's your system screaming for its usual dopamine fix. The source argues pretty strongly that actually healing this overstimulated dopamine pathway is almost a prerequisite before stillness can feel comfortable.
That's massive. So the core problem is that modern life creates a biological state that's fundamentally actively working against stillness.
Pretty much, yeah.
Which leads us straight to the book's really central kind of revolutionary idea. Stillness is an output.
This is where it really flips the perspective. Instead of seeing stillness as something you do, a technique you perform through sheer effort, the book presents it as a state, something that naturally emerges when your underlying systems, your brain, your body, are actually prepared and ready.
An output.
Yeah.
Like the result of having the right inputs.
Exactly. It's the outcome of biological readiness. Trying to force meditation when your system isn't ready, the book compares it to trying to sprint a marathon when you haven't slept and haven't eaten.
You're going to fail.
Right. But the failure isn't in the technique of running, is it? It's in the fundamental lack of capacity. You just don't have the resources.
That makes so much intuitive sense. You can't just willpower your way into a state your biology isn't set up for. Okay, so if stillness is an output, what are the biological inputs? What creates this readiness? The book dives into something called the calm chemistry code.
Yeah, it gets specific here. It highlights certain key neurotransmitters essential for that calm state. GABA, for example, that's our main calming neurotransmitter. It kind of dampens down excess neural firing.
Okay, GABA for calm. What else?
A balanced dopamine system, but balanced for sustained, gentle focus, not novelty-seeking.
Yeah.
Serotonin, which helps with feeling grounded, stable. Acetylcholine is also mentioned for sustaining attention, that ability to gently bring your focus back.
And I'm guessing stress just throws a wrench in all of that delicate chemistry.
Oh, absolutely. That's a huge point. Stress hormones like cortisol and also excitatory neurotransmitters like glutamate, they just flood the system. And when they're dominant, the state needed for stillness is basically neurologically impossible.
How so?
Well, high cortisol actively suppresses GABA, so you feel wired, anxious. Too much glutamate fuels those racing thoughts, that agitation. The source is really clear. Shifting your brain chemistry towards calm requires active recovery, managing stress. You can't just sit down in the middle of a cortisol flood and expect stillness. It contrasts stress chemistry versus stillness chemistry. They're fundamentally incompatible in the moment.
So deep breathing might help a tiny bit, maybe?
A little, yeah, but it can't magically override a system flooded with stress chemicals. Breathing techniques work best when the system is already somewhat regulated, not when it's in full-on threat-detected mode.
Right, okay. And tightly linked to that chemistry is something basic but huge. Sleep. The book really hammers home the sleep-mind connection.
Oh, it's completely non-negotiable, according to this source. Deep sleep is when your brain actually replenishes those crucial neurotransmitters, the GABA, dopamine, serotonin we just talked about. Plus, that's prime time for the brain's cleanup crew, the glymphatic system, to clear out metabolic waste. If you're running on sleep debt, your brain literally hasn't done its overnight maintenance.
So trying to find focus is like trying to work on a cluttered desk in your head.
Exactly. It's neurologically way harder. And your circadian rhythms, your internal clock, are also vital for timing the release and uptake of all these chemicals correctly throughout the day.
So that old advice, just wake up super early to meditate, even if you're totally exhausted.
Might actually be counterproductive, yeah. The book suggests that prioritizing good restorative sleep is actively building the foundation for stillness later on. Sleep first, maybe.
Interesting. And what about fuel? Fueling the mind-body engine.
Yeah, you need the right building blocks. The source talks about how nutrition provides essentials like glucose for brain energy, healthy fats for brain structure, oxygen, of course, but also key micronutrients, things like magnesium, B vitamins.
Why are those important?
They're crucial cofactors. They're needed to actually synthesize the neurotransmitters we need for calm and focus. They also power the brain's energy production. So adequate fuel directly impacts your ability to sustain attention, regulate emotions, both vital for stillness, and movement gets a mention too for circulation and brain health.
Okay, so we've got the biological essentials: chemistry, sleep, fuel, managing stress. How do we actually build this state of readiness? The next part of the source is about strategy. It talks about training stillness, like a muscle.
I really like this framing. It takes the mystique out of it. It says stillness is a skill tied to actual neural circuits in your brain. And like training any muscle, it needs gradual effort followed by recovery.
So not just pushing harder and harder.
No, exactly. You build the brain pathways for calm through successful repetitions. That means short, positive experiences of just being present, even for a moment, followed by rest. Trying to force really long sessions, especially when you're depleted, can actually backfire. It can make your brain associate meditation with struggle.
Right.
The book actually suggests ending your practice on a win, feeling slightly better, or at least neutral, not frustrated. That reinforces the positive connections.
Exit on a win. I like that. It's practical. And the book gives a kind of diagnostic tool, right? The 5 layers of readiness.
This is brilliant, I think. It lays out a progression. Fuel is the base. Then comes chemistry, then circuitry, then environment. And finally, stillness can emerge.
Can you unpack those layers a bit?
Sure. Fuel is your basic metabolic energy and nutrients. That supports balanced neurochemistry, having the right brain chemicals online. Good chemistry allows healthy neural circuitry, the actual brain networks for attention and self-regulation, to function well. Then you need a supportive environment, feeling safe, not chronically stressed for those circuits to operate optimally.
And only then.
Only when all those underlying layers are reasonably solid, the source says, can stillness naturally emerge. So if you're struggling, you don't just think, I'm failing. You ask, okay, which layer is wobbly today? Is it my fuel, my chemistry? Did I sleep badly? It shifts the focus from blame to strategy.
That is incredibly empowering. It gives you somewhere concrete to look. So what are some actual daily habits we can use to build this readiness? The book has The Minimalist's Guide to Daily Rhythm.
Yeah, this is about small, manageable things. Like getting some natural sunlight in your eyes shortly after waking up helps set your body clock.
Okay. Simple enough.
Taking really short, like 1-minute breath awareness pauses during the day, just micro resets for the nervous system. Working with your natural focus cycles, those roughly 90-minute ultradian rhythms, by taking short breaks instead of pushing through.
So focus, then break.
Yeah.
Focus, then break.
Exactly. Maybe using that afternoon slump for a quick power nap or just quiet rest is possible. And definitely creating a consistent, calming, wind-down routine in the evening to signal to your body it's time to prepare for sleep. These aren't fancy techniques. They're basic biological rhythm setters that build capacity over time.
They're like paving the biological runway so stillness can land later.
Okay.
And what about when you're really run down, totally depleted? There's the 3-day recovery protocol.
Yes, this is presented as a more intensive reset, a way to deliberately interrupt a major stress loop and help your system recover biochemically.
How does it work?
It involves drastically cutting back on digital input and sensory overload on day 1, really quieting things down. Day 2 is focused on actively rebuilding deep rest, nutrient-dense food, maybe some gentle movement or time in nature. And day 3 is about gently reestablishing those basic daily rhythms we just talked about to kind of consolidate the recovery.
So it's a structured break to actually restore the system.
Exactly. It's designed to make stillness feel possible again after burnout, instead of trying to meditate through the burnout, which often doesn't work.
And the source even talks about technology, but maybe not how we usually think about it. Neurofeedback and tech-assisted readiness.
Right. It doesn't position tech as a magic bullet, but more as a mirror. Tools that give you objective feedback about what's actually happening in your nervous system.
Like what kind of tool?
Neurofeedback is mentioned for potentially training brainwaves. But even simpler things, like HRV monitors heart rate variability trackers.
Yeah, I've heard those. They measure stress.
Sort of. They measure the flexibility of your nervous system. A low HRV reading often indicates your system is stuck in stress mode. So maybe that's data telling you today isn't the day for a challenging meditation sit, but for gentle recovery instead. Sleep trackers can give similar insights. It's about using the data to work with your biology, not just push against it.
Using tech as a guide, not just another performance metric. And hey, so let's say you've built some of this readiness. How does the actual practice of meditation change based on this perspective? The book mentions the 5-minute rule.
This is huge. It challenges the idea that meditation needs to be long to be good. The source really champions starting small, maybe just 5 minutes, maybe even 2.
Seriously? 2 minutes?
Yeah. The goal isn't duration, it's consistency and having a successful experience. Remember, exit on a win. Ending a short sit feeling slightly better, or at least okay, builds that positive association. It strengthens the neural circuits for calm. Long, frustrating sessions where you feel like a failure, they're actually counterproductive from this viewpoint.
Success breeds success. Start small, make it positive. I like it. And building on that, biological rituals that work, this sounds like more than just forming a habit.
It is. It's about using cues your nervous system understands instinctively. Applied neurobiology, basically. Using consistent sensory anchors.
Like what?
Like a specific smell, maybe an essential oil, or always practicing in the same quiet location. Using a particular sound cue to start, or practicing at the same time each day. These things act as signals to your body.
Signals for what?
Signals that say, okay, it's safe now. We're shifting gears into stillness. It kind of bypasses your thinking mind and speaks directly to the body's deeper regulatory systems, preparing it for the state you want to enter.
That makes sense, using the body's own language.
Mm-hmm.
But what happens when you do sit? Maybe you've done all this prep, and instead of peace, you get uncomfortable feelings.
Yeah.
Maybe old stress or emotions bubble up. The book calls this emotional detox.
Yeah, and it frames this as completely normal, even necessary sometimes. It suggests that as your nervous system finally starts to feel safe enough to let its guard down, stored tension, unprocessed stress, old emotions that got stuck, they can start to surface. They might feel like physical sensations or strong feelings. The key insight here is that this isn't meditation failing or something going wrong.
It's something coming out.
Exactly. It's the body finally getting a chance to discharge or process what it couldn't handle when it was in survival mode. The advice is to try and meet this with presence, with compassion, not with judgment or trying to push it away. It's part of the healing process that stillness can enable.
That reframe alone could change everything for someone struggling with that. It takes away so much potential self-blame.
It really does.
Which leads perfectly into maybe the most compassionate message in the whole source. You're not lazy, you're depleted.
This is such a core takeaway, that feeling of not being able to focus, wanting to quit, feeling restless. What often looks like a lack of willpower or discipline or even just plain laziness.
Yeah.
The source argues it's very often simply a lack of biological resources. Your brain and body literally don't have the fuel or the right chemical balance or enough rest to sustain attention or drop into calm, regulated state.
So it's physiology, not character.
Precisely. And understanding that shifts everything. You stop blaming yourself and start thinking strategically, okay, what does my system need right now? It replaces shame with practical, compassionate action.
Shame to science. Love that. And the book zooms out even further, right? It talks about nervous system belonging. What's that about?
It's a reminder that we don't regulate in isolation. Our ability to feel calm and safe is deeply shaped by our relationships, our sense of community.
You mean like being around calm people helps us feel calm?
Exactly. That's co-regulation. It's a real biological process where one person's calm nervous system can help soothe and regulate another's. So practicing meditation in a supportive group or even just spending time in safe, non-judgmental relationships can actually help repair our own capacity for self-regulation. It builds that foundational, felt sense of safety that stillness needs.
So connecting with others isn't just a nice to have. It can actually be part of building the biological capacity for inner peace.
Wow. And the book also brings in this idea of seasons of the brain.
Seasons,
Yeah.
like winter, spring.
Sort of, but also thinking about our own natural rhythms beyond just the daily clock. Our energy ebbs and flows throughout the day, those ultradian cycles again, maybe even seasonally changes in light, energy levels. The source suggests aligning your practice, maybe the type, maybe the intensity with these natural fluctuations.
Instead of forcing the exact same practice every single day regardless.
Right. Listening to your body's signals about what feels right now. Some days might be for deeper practice, others for very light touch, or just rest. That listening itself becomes part of the practice. More sustainable, maybe deeper in the long run.
Bringing it all together then, the source makes this very explicit shade, doesn't it? From shame to science.
Yes, that's really the culmination. Once you understand that the difficulties, the fidgeting, the racing thoughts are biological signals driven by chemistry, sleep, stress levels, the state of your neural circuits, you can let go of the shame. You stop blaming yourself. Science gives you this compassionate, evidence-based map for understanding what's going on and rebuilding your system's capacity from the ground up. Stillness becomes about your biological state, not about your moral character or how spiritual you are.
Which brings us right back to that core message, the title itself. Build the brain, then meditate.
Exactly. That's the thesis, plain and simple. Stillness isn't something you wrestle into submission. It's the natural output of a biological system that's properly resourced.
Resource how?
Fueled, rested, chemically balanced, regulated, feeling safe. The blueprint it offers isn't about mastering a technique through force. It's about strategically cultivating biological readiness. It swaps out rigor for rhythm, force for finding flow.
And the underlying promise, I guess, is that if you do this foundational work,
stillness stops being something you desperately chase. It becomes more like a natural state you can return to. It gets wired into your biology.
It becomes neurologically accessible.
Accessible, yeah. Maybe even your default, sometimes.
Wow. Okay, this deep dive into build the brain, then meditate really offers such a different lens, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
So refreshing and grounded in science, explaining why finding that quiet space can feel so incredibly hard sometimes. It just shifts the entire focus. It's not just in your head. It's about getting your chemistry right, your sleep sorted, your energy levels up, making sure your nervous system feels safe. Calm isn't just mental gymnastics. It's built literally in your body.
And the real power in that, I think, is the permission it gives you. It just lifts that burden of shame you might carry if you've struggled with meditation.
Right. You weren't broken. You weren't undisciplined.
You were probably just running on empty, biologically speaking, depleted or misaligned with what your system actually needed.
So it empowers you to become a partner with your system, giving it what it needs to find calm instead of trying to battle it into submission.
Exactly. It turns judgment into curiosity. Blame into strategy.
It's a path of self-compassion, really, but guided by biology.
Well said.
So maybe the final thought to leave you with, based on all this, if that restlessness, that distraction, that discomfort you feel sometimes when you try to sit quietly, if those really are biological signals, what might your system be trying to tell you right now? What needs attention? Maybe more rest, better fuel, less noise, more safety before you even try to find stillness. What's one biological building block you could maybe focus on just for today?